All right. So, what I was making videos on some other things, and then uh, it sparked me to make another one. um, Sort of remotely related, but yeah, basically it's on a continuation of the whole past videos I made about, like, you know, if you're black and you disagree with the idea that you're, being systemic, living as a time in a system of systemic racism, whatever, you're being, systemically oppressed or whatever, or you just, that you don't share the same views or whatever, that you're uh, sort of immediately attacked or, uh, you know, vehemently labeled so and so, like a coon, house nigga, so and so, Uncle Tom, all that stuff. This video is going to be a little bit. It's going to be less of all that stuff, the insults and stuff, and more of sort of just to get at, from a different perspective, of where some of the hostility might come from. Or they just even approach me in a way that sort of facilitates, allows that hostility to manifest this stuff, whatever. I'll explain. So, again, like I just said, basically, I've had encounters with a lot of the black people who, I don't agree with on this subject. They usually come to me first of all, but if I don't agree with them, they label me any one of the names I just mentioned before, and they tell me, "Oh, I love the white man, I lick his boot," blah 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 blah, all that stuff. And I'm gonna go in. Here's the thing. I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna ask a question. So. I'm gonna kind of try and see if I can get at why they want me to respond in a particular way. That being, they would prefer. Apparently, it is implied they would prefer that I respond in a way that aligns with their views. And it's like they would expect that I do it because I'm one of them and I'm oppressed just as they are. And it's like, at least that's the sense I get when I talk to them. I don't recall most of them actually telling me this, but there's probably at least one or two people that told me at least some of that much, and it's like they're trying to wake me up or whatever. Here's the thing, right? This is going back off two recent videos I just made about how, like, from the perspective of the oppressed person in question, how they're expected to respond, in the context of the Marxist class warfare ideology. Here's the thing. And what, first of all, a question to those black people out there, who would expect me to respond in a way, that's like against the status quo or whatever, as they claim. So a question to you guys, how do you expect me to respond, like, to this whole idea that I'm oppressed? Is that really the only way to expect me to respond to that idea being laid out to me? Do you really? I mean, I may have, even if I were, very very poor or whatever. I wasn't necessarily poor growing up, but we did struggle a little bit, and I struggled in my last few years as an adult, as a young adult. How would you expect me to respond? Like, even being in the struggle, that, like, in terms of supporting myself, how would you, in getting a job, whatever, how would you expect me to respond to the idea that I'm being oppressed? It's because I'm living in a system where I'm systematically being oppressed due to racism. How would you, do you expect me to respond in no other way than to just say, yeah, you know what, I am struggling in this way because I'm black and I'm being living in a country that systemically favors white people, and they have white privilege and all that stuff. I mean, do you really expect me to respond any other way? I mean, do you not expect me to respond any other way? And if so, why is that? The reason I ask these questions is because at what point, from the perspective of someone in the oppressed class, the proletariat, the working class, disadvantaged class, whatever, disadvantaged group, whatever you want to call it, in the context of Marxist ideology, at what point would you expect me to come to that conclusion on my own? At what point would I not have the resources necessary? Could I particularly say, as someone who's designated as part of the oppressed class, at what point could I decide with full understanding in its full context that I lack the resources necessary to reach my full potential as a human being? Right? Because that is at least part of the proper context of where all this comes from. And then following up with that, what resources would I, as a black person, should I need? In your view, what resources should I need to get to the point where I'm actually, I'm not oppressed by this systemically racist system or whatever? At what point should I get to that point where I'm not affected by it, or I'm not held back by it? What does that look like? What resources will I need, and why would I need them? Because here's the thing, in its context, the people who are living in the oppressed system, i.e. the working class or whatever, they're oppressed because they don't have the resources necessary to really be free to be themselves. At what point would you determine, as a black person, to another black person, that other black person being me, what point would you determine what resources I need to be to get to the point where I'm free to really be myself? At what point am I free to be myself? At what point am I not free to be myself? How do you go determining that for any one individual, let alone a group of people? What does that look like? What does it look like when you're free to be yourself? What does it look like when you're what does not being affected by racism look like? And I know it seems like a broad question. It might be in one sense at least, but I mean, when I think about, when you think about, really, what does it look like? I mean, are we just talking about, say, in the context of the white privilege argument, probably getting I probably get a job, probably more likely to get a job. I'm equally likely to get a job as a white person. I'm not followed around the store as much. I'm followed a lot less in the store as a white person probably would. Or I'm not. I'm equally likely as a white person to get shot by police. So not, less likely as I've been before, because we're more likely, according to you, we're more likely to get shot killed by police. I mean, or let's see what else. I mean, is it also just I'm less likely to get judged on my hairstyle or something. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad example, but you get what I'm saying, right? I mean, is it more than just those individual things? Is it the combination of those things? All those things together? What about, me being less likely to be stereotyped or something as a criminal or some shit? I mean, what is the full set of criteria for me not being affected by, this systemic racism that you claim that we're in, that I'm a victim of? But at what point is someone like me not affected by the systemically racist system? How would you be able to tell? Now, this is not me saying you should be able to determine each individual case. Although I think you should. I think that's the only real way to go about it. But it's in the context of it applying to groups, because that's the way these theories work, especially in the sociological sense. It does it by groups, not individuals. How would you determine, right, as a group, what that looks like? Because how could you determine what a group being in a position to realize its full potential? Like, when I'm being in a position, I can see that argument, but at the point where they have realized their full potential, what would that look like? What would that look like for the group? What would that look like for the individual? I don't understand. How would you answer that question? Because that's what it comes down to. It's because in its context, as a black person, I'm being oppressed by this racist system, as I've been told. And the reason I'm oppressed is because this racism is holding me back from getting to the point where I'm pretty much like I'm free to be who I really am. In the context of that ideology. That's the thing. How is racism keeping me from being who I am? How would you claim that? So I'm saying, I mean, are we just talking about, again, those individual instances, like, or what? Those incidents, those instances that are not even necessarily, as far as we know, they're isolated from each other. As far as I know, how can you answer that for me? Because I don't understand. And here's the thing is, if I am really truly being held back, that means, you would expect me to respond in that way and be like, yeah, okay, I'm held back, and then now here's how I'm going to respond to it, right? According to you, I should respond in the way that I'm fighting against the system, and I'm putting it out, and I'm sounding, like, if I'm not hating white people, I'm at least, being like, oh, whites have privilege or whatever, and then, we need to go against the system. And here's the thing. At what point do you think I should, why do you, what resources do you think I should have to be able to come to that conclusion? Me understanding where all this, in this context, the root context in which all this, all the oppression narrative comes from, for lack of a better term. If I were poorer, for example, if I didn't get to go to college like I did, at what point would you expect me, what educational resources would you expect me to have? Or what educational resources would I have to come to the point where I'm able to, on a level of critical, I'm able to comprehend, this idea, I'm able to think critically about it. At what point would I have to be capable of determining any of this for myself? And that's part of the problem, because if we're the ones that are being held back and we need to make changes in order to, better things for ourselves, how are we going to do that if we don't understand what the problem is? And if we can't even decide on what the problem is. I'm not suggesting we can't decide on what the problem is. I'm saying You know, at what point do I have to be? What things do I have and not have to be able to determine, to be able to comprehend the nature of my situation, not having these things, and it being because I'm being treated differently, because I'm black, because I'm living in a systemically racist system. How will I be able to determine that? What resources would I need to be able to determine that? And it requires that I have some sort of academic understanding, because there's academic backing on this. There's an academic context. There's a philosophical context to back it all up, or there's a philosophical root that it comes from. So at what point would I be able, should I be to be able to determine this? How do you expect me to respond to this otherwise? Do you get what I'm saying? It sounds like I repeat myself a lot, but as a black person, I mean, is that the only way you expect me to respond? Like, how are there any other ways you would expect me to respond other than cooning or being a house Negro or whatever? Because the thing is, shouldn't I be at the point where I'm able to decide something for myself in the first place? Shouldn't I be able to decide for myself whether I'm being held back by racism? Shouldn't I be able to decide, or just be capable of deciding for myself, what me not being held back, what me being held back or not being held back by racism looks like? Especially if it's more covert than overt, as I've been told. At what point do I decide that? Because I mean, being held back by something such as racism, which is it's not so clear cut as being physically obstructed when you're trying to walk down a hall, get down, go through a door. It's much more complex than that. So what would that look like for any one individual black person? You know what I mean? And if these are all the examples that I brought up before, being perceived as more likely to be perceived as a criminal, more likely to be shot and killed by police, more likely to be followed around the store and being accused of robbing shit, or stealing, robbing the store, what I mean. Being more judged, or being harder to get into school, get a job because of my name or the way I wear my hair. That's probably how it naturally looks. If those are the only ways you can lay, are there any other ways in that? Are those the only examples you can lay out to me? Then, I mean, so be it. But if I hope you realize that does not apply to me in any sort of way. Then you run through all the checklists. If I don't fit any of those boxes, or if I need to fit in all of them for it to count, and if I don't fit in all of them, then it can't reasonably be concluded that I'm oppressed. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, I don't. What are the conditions from the perspective of a black person? I mean, I'm sorry, as someone who was designated in the oppressed class, as someone, a black person who was being targeted by a racist system, how am I supposed to be able to determine that, and how should I act according to you? If it's going to be the same things I've heard, then I'm sorry, that doesn't address the problem that I'm having. It doesn't solve the problem. In context of at what point should a black person be able to, or someone of the oppressed class, be able to determine, at what point would they be able to determine that they're being prevented from reaching their true potential because they lack the resources necessary due to the oppressed system? How would you know what resources I lack to be able to reach my full potential as a black person? What does that look like for me? or for a group of black people in general? What does that look like? How can you determine that? You know, so that's all I got. I mean, if you can answer that for me, without the same old talking points that I've heard that don't really address the question any of the questions I just asked, then then I guess we get somewhere. If not, then I mean, sorry, but you can't convince me otherwise. I mean, because it's not up to any one person to decide how another person is, uh, whether another person is oppressed or not. That's not. I mean, unless there's good enough reason. But I mean, what I'm getting now is not cutting it. I mean, how are you going to tell me without? And this is, by the way, without me telling you anything in my life or whatever. How are you supposed to lay that out? How are you supposed to tell me? How can you reasonably telling me any of this? So yeah, I challenge any black person who is on on the side of, oh well, we're black and we're being oppressed, we're living in a racist system that oppresses us. It's not necessarily, that's may be covert, maybe overt, maybe both. Probably as more covert than overt. Any of that. If that is the side you're on, I challenge you to come to me with something more substantial than these talking points and explain to me in the context of the Marxist working class versus ruling class ideology. How I, as someone of the designated working class, oppressed class, is supposed to be able to determine for myself how I'm being oppressed, as in how I'm being held back by the system I'm living in from reaching my full potential as a human, and how I should respond accordingly in the context of that ideology. Alright, so that's all I gotta say. Yeah, so I feel like I stole that out there. Yeah, until next time.